No credible body has ever confirmed a Loch Ness Monster. Decades of hunters, dating back to the 1930s, found no bone, no body, no proof at all. Then in 2019, a team of geneticists from 5 different universities skipped cameras and sonar entirely, testing 250 water samples for traces of anything alive down there. Their results still would not close the case. The monk who met something in the river. The earliest written mention of anything strange near Loch Ness comes from a 7th century biography of an Irish monk named Columba, written by a monk called Adam Nan, roughly 100 years after Columba's death. According to that text, in the year 565, Columba was traveling through the lands of the Picts near Inverness when he came across a group of people burying a man who had been attacked and killed by a creature the text calls a water beast, living in the River Ness, which flows directly out of the loch. The story continues that Columba, wanting to demonstrate the power of his faith, ordered one of his own companions to swim across the same river. When the creature surfaced and moved to attack the swimmer, Columba made the sign of the cross and commanded it directly, telling it to go no further and to go back at once. According to the biography, the creature immediately retreated, and nobody in the area reported being harmed by it again. Historians studying this account generally treat it the same way they treat other similar stories from the same era, as a standard piece of religious writing meant to demonstrate a saint's holy authority over dangerous forces, a common storytelling convention in biographies of early Christian missionaries, rather than a literal wildlife record. Similar tales of holy men calming dangerous water creatures appear elsewhere in writing from this same period. Some modern writers have also pointed to ancient Pictish stone carvings found in the region, which occasionally depict an unusual beast with flippers, as a possible earlier hint of the same local tradition, though historians studying Pictish art generally caution against reading too much specific meaning into carvings, whose original purpose remains uncertain. Whatever this specific passage was originally meant to represent, it remains the oldest written reference anyone has connected to the modern legend, sitting quietly in historical texts for well over 1,000 years before anyone thought to call it evidence of anything. Records held by the official Loch Ness Monster sightings register note only a small handful of additional reports across the centuries that followed, including a claimed encounter by a Duncan Campbell in 1527 and roughly 24 more scattered reports logged between 1500 and 1800, none of which generated any lasting public attention at the time. That single old story and the scattered handful of quiet centuries that followed it would likely have stayed a minor historical footnote forever, if not for a stretch of newly built road that gave 20th century drivers a clear, uninterrupted view of the water for the very first time. The road that created a modern legend. Before the modern legend took hold, a handful of scattered reports had already trickled in from residents along the loch. A Scottish doctor named D. Mackenzie reported seeing an odd, log-like object moving across the water in 1871. In August 1930, the Northern Chronicle described fishermen whose boat was disturbed by a creature they estimated at 6 meters long, a report that drew only mild local curiosity at the time. Everything changed in 1933 when a new road finished along the shore of Loch Ness gave drivers their first clear, elevated view of the water. That year, hotel manager Aldi Mackay and her husband reported seeing a large, whale-like creature rolling near Drumnadrochit. The Inverness Courier published the story on May 2, 1933, and the term its editor used to describe the creature effectively coined the phrase Loch Ness Monster. The story spread fast. Later that year, George Spicer and his wife told the same paper they had watched a long-necked animal cross the road in front of their car before vanishing into the loch. National papers picked it up, correspondents headed north, and tourists began flocking to the shore, with one traveling circus reportedly offering a cash reward for capturing the creature alive. On November 12, 1933, local man Hugh Gray took the first photograph ever claimed to show the creature near the village of Foyers. It was blurry enough that skeptics at the time suggested it showed his own dog fetching a stick or an otter rolling near the surface. A new road, a wave of sightings, and one doubtful early photo set the stage for the single image that would define the legend for the next 60 years. The photograph that fooled the world for 60 years. In 1933, the Daily Mail hired big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherill to investigate the growing wave of sightings. Wetherill reported finding large footprints along the shoreline, claiming they belonged to the creature itself. When plaster casts were sent to the Natural History Museum, experts determined they had been made using a dried hippopotamus foot, a common umbrella stand at the time. The Mail publicly ridiculed Wetherill, and he reportedly wanted revenge. On April 21, 1934, the Daily Mail published a photograph credited to London physician Robert Kenneth Wilson, showing a long, curved neck rising from the water. Known as the surgeon's photograph, it became the single most famous image ever tied to the Loch Ness Monster, reprinted for decades as the closest thing to real proof anyone had produced. The photograph held up for 60 years, until 1994, when a man named Christian Sperling confessed shortly before his death. He explained that Wetherill, his stepfather, had recruited him for his skill as a model maker. Together with Wetherill's son Ian, Sperling built a small head and neck from plastic wood, attached it to a toy submarine, and photographed it gliding through a quiet inlet, framed to hide its tiny scale. An insurance agent later approached Dr. Wilson specifically because his respectable reputation would lend the photo credibility the hoaxers could not provide themselves. Some researchers have noted inconsistencies in how the confession was later told, including uncertainty over exactly which inlet was used. Even so, a staged toy model faking the legend's most iconic image has become the widely accepted explanation. Why so many photographs and sonar readings from this same loch keep running into similar trouble comes down to something basic about the water itself. The lake built to hide something. Loch Ness sits inside the Great Glen, a valley cut diagonally across the Scottish Highlands along the Great Glen Fault, a crack in the Earth's crust that formed roughly 400 million years ago as two ancient landmasses crushed together beneath what is now northern Scotland. Over hundreds of millions of years, and especially during the Ice Age, glaciers scoured that same fault line into the long, narrow trench holding the loch's water today. The numbers are enormous. Loch Ness stretches roughly 23 miles long, reaching a maximum depth of about 755 feet, with an average of around 433. That depth gives it more fresh water by volume than every lake in England and Wales combined, making it the largest body of fresh water in the British Isles, even though a couple of other Scottish lochs cover more surface area. Valley walls rise abruptly to roughly 1,500 feet in places, a clear sign of how hard the glaciers cut here. The water adds its own cover. A high concentration of peat washed in from the hillsides gives it a dark, tea-colored tint that cuts visibility to just a few inches in many spots. The steep basin leaves almost no shallow shelf for plants, and the loch holds no islands beyond one small exception, further proof of how thoroughly the ice scoured it clean. Its sheer volume also keeps the water at a fairly steady temperature year-round, so it rarely freezes. Enormous volume, extreme depth, and inches of visibility make this an environment genuinely hard to search with cameras or the naked eye, whatever actually lives down there. That did not stop researchers from trying anyway across several major expeditions in the decades that followed. The film that split experts for decades. On the morning of April 23, 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale, on the final day of his first visit to the loch, spotted a large hump moving across the water near Foyers. He grabbed his 16mm camera and captured roughly 50 feet of film showing the object cross the loch, leaving a wake he said no normal boat would produce. The footage convinced him so completely that he quit engineering entirely, making 57 separate expeditions back to the loch over the next 27 years. In 1965, the RAF's Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Center examined the film and concluded the object was probably animate, showing signs of life, and was neither a boat nor a submarine, giving Dinsdale's footage more institutional credibility than almost any other piece of Nessie evidence. That did not go unchallenged. Later researchers, including Adrian Shine, reviewed the film frame by frame using video technology that had not existed in 1965 and spotted a small, pale blob sitting exactly where a helmsman would sit at the stern of a small boat. Along with signs the original analysis had overestimated the object's size and speed. Some researchers still push back, arguing the comparison boat used later was a different color and filmed under different light than what Dinsdale described. Decades later, qualified experts on both sides still disagree on what the footage actually shows, one of the clearest examples of the same evidence producing two competing conclusions. That same pattern, committed searchers pushing equipment to its limits, would repeat again on a far larger scale once sonar entered the picture. The sonar hunts that kept finding something and nothing. In 1972, an American lawyer and inventor named Robert Rines, working with the Academy of Applied Science, combined sonar equipment with an underwater camera positioned in Urquhart Bay. When the sonar detected a large moving object nearby, the camera captured a blurry, indistinct image that Rines and his team later enhanced using computer processing at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. The resulting picture showed what looked like a large diamond-shaped flipper, and it quickly became one of the most widely cited pieces of supposed physical evidence in the entire history of the search. Presented in 1975 to a gathering of roughly 200 scientists, journalists, and members of parliament, with representatives from institutions including the Smithsonian and Harvard's Museum of Comparative Zoology, reportedly agreeing at the time that some kind of large aquatic animal likely lived in the loch. That excitement did not hold up under later scrutiny. In 1984, both Discover Magazine and Skeptical Inquirer separately reported that the original, unenhanced photographs looked nothing like the crisp flipper shape everyone had seen published, showing instead a vague, indistinct blur that appeared to have been retouched by hand after the initial computer enhancement to create the more convincing diamond outline. A separate Rines photograph from 1975, showing what looked like a distinct gargoyle-like head, met an even more definitive fate. In 1987, researchers involved in a later sonar sweep of the loch located the actual object on the lake floor and identified it conclusively as a rotting tree stump, which has since been recovered and put on public display at a Loch Ness exhibition center. That same 1987 expedition, known as Operation Deep Scan, represented the most ambitious search effort attempted up to that point. Organized by researcher Adrian Shine, the operation deployed 20 small boats equipped with sonar equipment, moving in a coordinated line across the entire width of the loch to create what organizers called a sonar curtain, designed to detect and track any large object passing through the water. The project also carried a wider scientific purpose beyond simply hunting for a monster, aiming to study general fauna living below 600 feet, map some of the loch's deepest sections, and monitor temperature variation throughout the water column. Over roughly 10 days of scanning, the operation identified several unusually strong sonar contacts sitting deeper in the water column than typical fish would normally be found. When researchers returned to check these same locations later, most of the contacts turned out to be fixed, unmoving objects on the lake floor, though a small handful had genuinely disappeared, suggesting whatever caused them may have been capable of independent movement. Shine himself has suggested some of these deeper contacts may represent seals, which are known to occasionally visit the loch, though the deep water column itself offers no food source that would normally draw a seal down that far. None of these sonar hunts, spanning multiple decades and increasingly sophisticated equipment, ever produced a confirmed image, recording, or physical sample that mainstream scientists accepted as proof of an unknown creature. A separate, more recent search effort, a 2003 expedition called Project Urquhart, backed by the BBC, deployed extensive sonar equipment across the entire loch, specifically hoping to settle the question once and for all, and it likewise concluded it had found no evidence supporting the existence of any large, unidentified animal. That accumulated decades of inconclusive searching set the stage for an entirely different, considerably more modern approach, one that would not rely on cameras or sound waves at all. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hitting subscribe means you won't miss the next one. The DNA test that finally checked for real. In the summer of 2018, a genuine international research team, led by Professor Neil Gemmell, a geneticist at the University of Otago in New Zealand, traveled to Loch Ness to attempt something no previous investigation had tried, testing environmental DNA, or eDNA, collected directly from the water itself. Every living creature constantly sheds tiny biological traces into its environment: scales, skin cells, waste, and other microscopic material, and modern genetic sequencing technology can detect and identify those traces even when the animal itself is never seen. Working with researchers from the Loch Ness Center, the University of Copenhagen, the University of Hull, and several other institutions, Gemmell's team traveled the loch's full 35-kilometer length aboard a boat, collecting 250 separate water samples in triplicate from multiple locations and depths across the loch, including areas close to its deepest point of roughly 220 meters. Each sample was processed, sequenced, and compared against massive global genetic databases capable of identifying nearly any known species from even tiny fragments of genetic material. Gemmell announced the full results in September 2019, and they were direct on several specific points. The team found no evidence whatsoever of any DNA resembling a plesiosaur or any other reptile remotely similar to the extinct marine dinosaur many eyewitness descriptions have compared the creature to. The results also ruled out sturgeon, catfish, and Greenland sharks, three other species some researchers had previously proposed as possible explanations for large, unexplained sightings. There is a very significant amount of eel DNA, Gemmell explained, noting that eel genetic material turned up in practically every single sample location across the entire loch. That eel finding pointed toward the one theory Gemmell's own data genuinely could not rule out, and it turned into the closest thing to a scientifically grounded explanation the entire modern investigation has ever produced. The giant eel theory scientists can't fully rule out. European eels are already a strange and genuinely fascinating species on their own terms. They begin their lives in the Sargasso Sea near the Bahamas, drift for years across the entire Atlantic Ocean as tiny larvae, and eventually swim up European rivers, including the River Ness, before settling into freshwater lakes like Loch Ness for years or even decades before eventually migrating all the way back across the ocean to breed and complete their life cycle. Gemmell was careful about exactly what his environmental DNA results could and could not prove regarding this specific species. The genetic data confirmed enormous quantities of eel material throughout the loch, but genetic sequencing alone cannot measure the physical size of the animals that left it behind. As Gemmell explained directly, the sheer quantity of eel material found meant his team could not discount the possibility that some unusually large eels might be living in the loch, though the data offered no way to confirm exactly how large any individual eel might actually grow. When asked directly how confident the identification itself was, Gemmell later confirmed the eel DNA had been matched all the way down to the specific species level, Anguilla, rather than only a broader, less certain family level match. Interestingly, this specific idea was not new. Gemmell noted that researchers investigating the loch had proposed a giant eel explanation for reported sightings as far back as 1933, an idea that gradually lost popularity over subsequent decades, as more dramatic theories involving surviving prehistoric reptiles captured public imagination instead. Adding a small piece of supporting context, just days before Gemmell's official announcement, a local fishing organization called the Ness District Salmon Fishery Board posted a video showing a long, eel-shaped object passing directly in front of one of their underwater cameras positioned in the River Ness itself. Skeptics studying this specific theory closely have raised a fair, pointed counter-argument. Ordinary-sized eels, even unusually large ones stretching 2 or 3 meters, still cannot easily explain some of the more elaborate eyewitness descriptions collected over the decades, particularly reports describing long, upright necks, humped backs, breaking the surface for sustained periods, or creatures allegedly seen moving on land. Whether any of those specific, more dramatic accounts have a natural explanation of their own, or whether large eels alone account for the entire pattern of sightings, remains a genuinely unresolved question even among researchers who take the giant eel theory seriously. That gap between one confirmed, unusually abundant species and centuries of far more elaborate eyewitness claims sits right at the center of why this legend has managed to survive for as long as it has, and it is far from the only lake in the world facing that exact same unresolved gap. The other lakes with the same story. Loch Ness is famous, but it is nowhere close to the only lake on Earth with its own long-running monster legend attached to it. In Canada's Okanagan Lake, a creature known as Ogopogo has roots stretching back to indigenous Silex oral traditions describing a water spirit called Naha-a-Itike, predating any European settlement of the region. The first recorded sighting by a European settler came in 1855, when a man claimed something dragged his horses underwater as he attempted to cross the lake, followed by a widely publicized 1926 sighting reported by roughly 30 separate witnesses gathered at a lakeside picnic, describing a dark, serpent-like shape estimated at somewhere between 15 and 50 feet long. In Lake Champlain, straddling the border between New York, Vermont, and Quebec, a similar creature known as Champ has been reported by area residents since the early 1800s, described using strikingly similar language to Nessie herself: a long neck, a dark body, and multiple humps breaking the surface. Researchers investigating Champ have used sonar surveys and underwater cameras in an effort to confirm the legend, and, exactly as in Scotland, these searches have detected occasional unexplained sonar contacts without ever producing conclusive physical proof. Researchers studying this broader pattern across multiple continents have proposed remarkably similar natural explanations for each of these separate legends: floating logs, misidentified sturgeon or other large fish, unusual wave patterns caused by underwater currents or shifting water temperatures, and otters or beavers briefly mistaken for something larger and stranger at a distance. Every one of these lakes also shares a further common feature worth being honest about, since each legend generates real, measurable tourism revenue for its surrounding community, with one estimate crediting Loch Ness with contributing over £40 million annually to the Scottish economy, and Lake Champlain's own Champ legend estimated to add tens of millions of dollars to the regional economy on the American and Canadian sides alike. None of this proves anything one way or the other about what people are actually seeing in any of these specific lakes. It does show clearly that Loch Ness is not some uniquely mysterious anomaly standing alone in the world. It is one particularly famous example of a pattern that keeps repeating itself in large, deep, cold lakes across multiple different countries and cultures, which says something meaningful about human perception and storytelling that goes well beyond the specific waters of a single Scottish loch. Why the sightings never stop. Since researchers began formally tracking claimed encounters, the official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register has logged more than 1,100 reports stretching back through recorded history, with new sightings continuing to be submitted and documented on a fairly regular basis even today. That steady stream of reports, spanning nearly a century of the modern legend alone, has kept public fascination with the loch remarkably durable despite decades of inconclusive scientific searching. Several ordinary, well-understood natural phenomena likely explain a meaningful share of these reports. Standing waves, unusual wind patterns moving across the loch's narrow, elongated shape, floating logs, otters, and diving birds have all been proposed by researchers as innocent explanations behind specific reported sightings over the years. And the same murky, low-visibility water that makes genuine photography difficult also makes it considerably easier for an ordinary object to look strange and unfamiliar at a distance. There is also a well-documented psychological tendency worth understanding here, a phenomenon called pareidolia, where the human brain naturally tries to impose familiar, recognizable shapes onto random or ambiguous visual information, the exact same basic mental process responsible for people seeing animal shapes in clouds or a face in the random pattern of wood grain. A brief, distant glimpse of a log, a wave, or a swimming animal, viewed for only a second or two across dark, choppy water, gives that same instinct plenty of ambiguous raw material to work with. The loch's role as a major tourist destination adds another layer worth acknowledging honestly, since the legend itself is estimated to contribute tens of millions of dollars annually to the local Scottish economy, creating a real, practical incentive for the story to remain alive and visible regardless of what science does or does not eventually confirm. None of that explains away every single report on file, and researchers studying the phenomenon generally avoid claiming they have personally debunked each and every individual sighting one by one. What the pattern does show clearly is that a very old legend, a uniquely difficult body of water to search properly, a well-documented quirk of human perception, and a powerful tourism economy have combined to keep this particular mystery alive for far longer and with far more sustained attention than most other similar unexplained creature legends have ever managed to achieve. What science actually says. Pulling every thread of this investigation together, the honest scientific position looks nothing like the confident claim that experts have declared the Loch Ness Monster real. Adrian Shine, who has personally taken part in essentially every major modern investigation of the loch, including Operation Deep Scan and years of dedicated fieldwork through the Loch Ness Project, has stated plainly that he never believed a prehistoric monster lived there, while remaining genuinely open to the idea that an unusually large fish, such as a sturgeon, might explain some specific sightings. Neil Gemmel's 2019 environmental DNA study, the most technologically advanced and thorough genetic survey ever conducted on the loch, found zero evidence supporting a surviving plesiosaur or any other reptile, and it also ruled out several other large fish species that had been previously proposed. What it did find was overwhelming evidence of one already known, non-mysterious species, the European eel, present in enormous quantities throughout the entire loch, leaving open only the considerably more modest possibility that some of these ordinary eels might occasionally grow larger than expected. A separate, well-known 2016 Sonar survey once claimed to have discovered an unusually deep crevice in the loch bed, reaching down to roughly 271 meters, briefly suggesting an unmapped hiding spot deeper than any previously recorded section of the loch. Further research afterward determined this specific reading was simply a sonar anomaly, an equipment misread rather than a genuine geological feature, closing off yet another supposed clue that had briefly generated fresh excitement. Taken together, decades of dedicated sonar searches, a debunked photograph that fooled the public for 60 years, a piece of famous film footage that qualified analysts still cannot fully agree on, a photographed tree stump mistaken for a monster's head, and the most advanced genetic survey modern science can currently offer, all point toward the same consistent conclusion. No confirmed physical evidence of an unknown large animal has ever been produced, even as the underlying legend itself and the genuinely mysterious abundance of eel DNA the 2019 study actually uncovered remain real enough to keep serious researchers coming back for another look. Verdict. Here is where things actually stand. The Loch Ness Monster legend traces back to a 7th century religious biography describing an encounter in 565 AD that most historians treat as a storytelling convention rather than a literal wildlife record. The modern version of the legend began in 1933, once a newly built road gave drivers their first clear view of the water, fueling a wave of sightings that peaked with the 1934 surgeon's photograph, later confirmed in 1994 to have been staged using a toy submarine and a small handmade model. Tim Dinsdale's 1960 film split expert opinion for decades, initially validated by official RAF photographic analysts, before later frame-by-frame review raised serious doubts about a possible boat. Robert Rhines's famous 1972 flipper photographs turned out to be retouched beyond what the original blurry images actually showed, and his separately photographed gargoyle head was identified in 1987 as an ordinary rotting tree stump resting on the lake floor. Operation Deep Scan's 10-day sonar sweep that same year, and a further BBC-backed search in 2003, both produced unexplained deep-water contacts, but no confirmed creature. In 2019, Neil Gemmel's genuine environmental DNA study, the most scientifically rigorous investigation the Loch has ever received, found zero genetic evidence of any reptile, catfish, sturgeon, or shark, while confirming an enormous, unexplained abundance of eel DNA that leaves the door open, if only slightly, to unusually large eels, explaining at least some portion of the centuries of reported sightings. No credible scientific organization has ever declared the Loch Ness Monster confirmed real, and the researchers who have spent their entire careers investigating the Loch, including Gemmel and Shine themselves, have consistently said as much directly whenever asked. What genuinely exists, verified by real science, is a 1,400-year-old legend, a uniquely dark and difficult body of water to search, one confirmed hoax photograph, one misidentified tree stump, one still disputed piece of film, and an honestly surprising amount of eel DNA that even the world's best genetic testing still cannot fully explain away. If this kind of deep water mystery is your thing, subscribing helps more of these stories reach you the moment they come out.